Good evening and welcome to Alan's Italy. Today we are privileged to welcome back Rick Hirst.
Thank you.
Rick, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
And Rick is going to be here a lot in the next couple of weeks, months, really. And it's going to be wonderful. We have some great things we've been planning. We'll tell you about that in a minute. First, this is the first live show we've had in 3 weeks. I'm doing a show every other week, and then last week we had a snowstorm. It started snowing again this morning. I thought we might have to cancel again, but here we are, and we're all set to do this show. And let me get that show up here. Okay. That should click in any second. There it is. So, show number 85, we are going to really be analyzing one of the great edifices in Italy, and that is the Baptistery of Florence. And Rick is going to provide the expertise in that area. I said expertise. Anyway.
Commentary?
Commentary.
Okay.
Narrative commentary. That's good.
Yeah,
that's very good. Okay, so, I was, as that introductory montage was going on, I was actually counting the number. I said, there's a lot of pictures in this montage of Tuscany. I would say half the pictures are Tuscany. I'd realized that it's either Florence or someplace in the countryside. So, obviously I have this incredible bias towards Tuscany, and that's what you see most of the time. Anyway, Rick and I have been talking lately about something which we've kind of batted this around for at least 2 years. I mean, I've been doing the show for 2 years, but Rick and I have been friends for longer than that, and it's probably something that we've discussed many, many times. And Rick brought this idea up to me a few months ago of doing a show about the history of Florence. And it kind of emanated from a question that I had asked Rick about I think it was 2 years ago when I was doing the show on Florence, which was 2 years ago. I asked Rick two questions. One was about the relationship between the workshop and the apprentices in Florence, and the other one was why was the Italian Renaissance begun in Florence, of all the places in the world? And, Rick gave me a great explanation. I did a lot of research, and I gave the explanation. And then Rick recently said he'd like to revisit that concept. And that concept is going to be revisited in a 2-part show, which is going to start in, February. And we're going to do 2 consecutive shows. And we're going to talk about the incredible 400-year history of Florence, the 1200s, the 1300s, the 1400s, and the 1500s, separated into 2 shows. And we'll try to do 200 years at a time. And this made sense to me until we began speaking a few minutes ago, and then I realized, and you said it, in fact, you said, we have to try to squeeze this into 2 hours. 400 years of Florentine history has to be squeezed into 2 hours. And, the fact is that it really doesn't have to be squeezed. But we'll go about it with that intention, and we'll see how that goes. So that's going to be coming up in February. And Rick is now putting it together. This is a little more unusual than normally because Rick is actually doing the research and will tell me the images that he wants to put in, and then we'll kind of get it all together. So we have a little while. In the meantime, we have this show. We have 2 more shows that I'll be doing. One is next week, and one is 2 weeks from that because I'm taking off the 24th because somebody invited us to a party.
Yes.
Yes, and Rick is the person who invited us, so we'll be doing that. Anyway, tonight's show is the Florence Baptistery. And as I said, of all the buildings in Italy, the Florence Baptistery is up there.
That's really right.
Why?
Because when you take a look at the baptistry, it is a perfect example of Tuscan Romanesque. It probably inspired more future Renaissance architects than practically any other building. There's a certain majesty to it and simplicity, even with its complex articulation of the front. So it is one of the jewels of Florence, and it's probably the oldest standing building in Florence. So its importance as a major landmark in the history of Florence and in the beginning of Renaissance design can't be overestimated.
Wow. It's going to be good. So let's begin. And I thought we'd throw in this image. And this, of course, is not Florence, but Pisa. And in fact, it's known as the Campo dei Miracoli, which is translated into the Field of Miracles. And it's basically the triumvirate. It's more than three items, but it's three major items: the baptistry on the left, the cathedral in the center, and the campanile, which is popularly known as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, on the right side. And I just wanted to throw this in to show what the general scheme of things would be, I guess, in the ideal sense.
Yes, it's especially an ideal sense because this is a typical major ecclesiastical combination. The baptistry on the axis with the nave of the church, and the campanile not very far away from the apse. This particular construction, it's sort of Pisan Lombardic Romanesque. The baptistry itself was finished at around 1000 AD. So it's probably the crown jewel of the Pisan Empire, which from about 800 to 1200 was one of the major trading ports in Italy. So this is as a result of Pisa being not only a major trading area, but also showing off its wealth. It's interesting that the Pisan baptistry is round. It's one of the unusual round baptistries in Italy, and there's a whole tradition of symbolism in shapes, which goes through Roman and also medieval history. In this particular shape, the round shape symbolizes eternity, which is one of the what happens when you're baptized and then go to heaven. You're alive in heaven for eternity. So this is one of the few that used that symbol exclusively. And there are many other complexes like this. There are baptistries axially in practically every major Italian city. So,
okay, so that's what every city would probably like to look like in their religious area. Right. This is
the
oldest baptistry in all of Italy.
Right, the oldest baptistry that's remaining. They don't know whether there are any earlier baptistries. This is the Lateran Baptistry, and it was in Rome, and it was originally built in 440, which is pretty early. As a matter of fact, this is an octagonal baptistry, and in the numerology of the time, the number 8 meant redemption and rebirth. So it's appropriate that this baptistry and many, many others throughout Italy are also octagonal. The door, as you can see over there, is from the from the 15th century. So that's not original. And you can see that there are many other walled up areas. But this was one of the first, and it was what is called an immersion baptistry. Most of the baptistries were baptizing adults because most of the people in Europe at that time were not Christian. So periodically during the year, they would open up the baptistry, and dozens at a time would become immersed to complete their conversion to Christianity. So this is the first, and it's been emulated many, many times.
I took a course at Bard College, as you know. I've taken this course with a professor there that I know. She studied this particular baptistry for a while, and she said the number 8 is very important in the world in general. And she said the Beatles song, 8 Days a Week.
Oh,
and she starts talking about it, and she was relating the concept of why they chose 8, and the 8th day, of course, being eternity.
Right, the
Monday,
day of
Tuesday,
rebirth.
Right. So
Day of rebirth.
there you go. Anyway, so here's a close-up of the Pisa
Baptistry, and you
So
can
it
see
was
it
round.
has an entirely different feel to it, and it is as a result of after 600 years, several of the cities had regained a lot of their commercial success. So you can see that it's unlike the Lateran; it's highly decorated.
It's magnificent, I've always thought. Okay, now we come to Florence, and this is the picture that I always use when I'm introducing a show related to Florence, because this is from the Piazzale Michelangelo looking out at the city, and you could see the magnificent dome of the cathedral, and then right kind of to the left and in front of it is the Campanile, and then kind of difficult to see that red dome to the left of the Campanile is not the baptistry. That's the Church of San Lorenzo. But if you look kind of down, you could very faintly see the baptistry. Here is a better view of the cathedral with the dome of Brunelleschi, the Campanile that was designed by Giotto. Between two smaller towers, on the left is the Badia Fiorentina, which I believe is the oldest church in Florence,
Right.
and the Bargello on the right. And then you see the red dome of the Church of San Lorenzo. But right in front of it, you see a white dome. This is the baptistry right here. That's the baptistry. Okay, so that's what it looks. It's the best I could get. I couldn't get anything as majestic as the one that I showed earlier from Pisa, but that's pretty much it. And this is what the Florentine baptistry looked like, and the piazza around it in the 19th century. I believe this is an Alinari photograph, and you could see the baptistry. On the left is a loggia. That's this right over here. This is the Loggia di Bigallo, and here's the cathedral over here on the right. And
There it is today.
take it away.
This final building was begun in 1059 as probably an expression of the first communal power of the rising commercial classes at the time. It took many years for Florence to recover from the disaster of the fall of the Roman Empire and the incursions of the barbarians during the 6th, 7th, and 800s. There was a commercial revolution starting from importing grain into the city, and they decided, Bishop Gerard actually decided that it was time not only for a new baptistry, but also a time for a new church. So the old church of Santa Reparata was destroyed, and a second church built over it, also called Santa Reparata. This was found out because excavations have been going on below the baptistry and in front of the street of the baptistry, starting from the early 20th century. And from 1965 through 74, the floor of the cathedral itself was unearthed in order to find out what it was composed of and its history. And they found out that there were several different churches on that property.
Several?
Several.
More than two?
Well, several in a row. Once Santa Reparata, then a change during the Carolingian period, and then so forth. Right. So the original baptistry is inside, and the foundations are in the basement. It was about the size of the Arian baptistry of Theodoric in Ravenna, and it was the foundations themselves indicate that it was probably a duplicate. So the original baptistry is from around 500
And
AD.
that baptistry was in the original cathedral?
Well, no, it was in the original baptistry was before this baptistry, and it's within the foundations of this baptistry.
Oh, I see.
So all of this was investigated very carefully by Franklin Toker in the 70s. He was part of the investigation of Santa Reparata and the baptistry. And so the baptistry goes back a very long time. Each time there's been a change in the fortunes of the city. There's been a change in its architecture. This particular change indicated that the city was being gradually taken over by the commercial families of the city and moving out the nobility. So this was one of their first expressions.
I have to ask a question. This is a question for the audience, really. So there are three buildings. There's the cathedral, obviously, that's where the services took place.
Right.
The campanile is the bell tower.
Right.
Right, so that's to announce to the people, well, events and.
Well, actually,
I mean, did it ring like every hour? So that was their clock.
Right. The bell tower was both the bell tower in the campanile and the bell tower in the Palazzo Vecchio were the warning towers for the city.
Right.
So they were among the tallest structures in the city. Mm-hmm. They were the most visible, and so therefore also they could be the most easily heard.
And the baptistry, of course, is where baptisms took place.
Until the end of the 19th century, all baptisms in Florence took place in the baptistry. After that, it was dispersed among a very rapidly growing city.
Right, and the proof of that is that I once asked my friend Luca, who was born in Florence, if he was baptized in this one.
Right.
And he said no, he was baptized in a different baptistry. So.
Right. So you can see this is an octagonal baptistry, which also incorporates a great deal of the symbology of the Trinity. There are 3 arcades. There are 3 panels in each arcade. The symbol 2 at the lowest panels indicates unity. So this is a very, very important expression of the symbolic meanings of this church, which was originally called a basilica. Interestingly enough.
Really?
Yeah, it could have been that meetings were held here because Santa Reparata II was being built.
Oh, of course.
Right. So, here we have this magnificent facade. It's made of Carrara marble and Prato green marble, alternating in bands, and the inside is sandstone. So that's its basic development.
Okay.
Let's go in.
Let's analyze the outside a little more. Well, I think this is the video. We have a video. Now, I don't think we need the sound on this. So I'm doing a video, and it will not have sound, Ellen. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. We'll narrate. Go ahead. So we're looking at the piazza.
Right. And many people walking by.
It's a very, very crowded spot.
Right.
Probably the most crowded spot in Florence.
Actually, we're seeing. I think that's a portion of the north door, or is
No,
that
that's
the
the
south?
east. That's the east door.
That's the east
That's
door.
the east door.
Right. Okay.
Oh.
Along the axis from the cathedral to the baptistry was the Roman wall, which was incorporated into the first Santa Reparata, and then the second as well.
The loggia that Laura's now showing. Laura took this video. Is the Loggia di Bigalo, which is a beautiful loggia. Now she's going to swing around and show the proximity, and I'm going to stop it, of the cathedral. So there's the cathedral.
Right.
And if we kept going now, you would see that. And there's the Campanile over there, and there's me. Get away from me! I don't know why she's showing me, but there's the Campanile, again the church, and of course the baptistry is right next to it. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so here's the schematic of the baptistry, where it says the east door, that is facing the Duomo right now, and then the north and south doors were wood until they were replaced as bronze doors. The opposite the east door is the high altar, the apse, which was originally semicircular, but around 1250 they made it into a square, a rectangular apse called the scarsella, which meant pocket during the Middle Ages. I don't know why they call it pocket.
Why were there three doors?
I mean, that's a good question. I really don't know why there are three doors.
Huh.
One of the
apologize for
no,
putting
that's
you on the
quite
spot.
right. One of the interesting things was that the south door actually faced the most populous part of the city,
Yeah.
and the north door faced empty suburbs. So it could have been that the south door was the more favored.
Yeah. People went in the south door.
Right.
Okay. So that's what it looks like.
This is the current south door. This is Pisano's door that was commissioned in 1330 for the baptistry. It's kind of interesting. It was commissioned around that time because Giotto was the head of the Capomastro of the works for the cathedral. His favorite person was Andrea Pisano, who had already done baptistry doors for other cathedrals, and he was a noted bronze sculptor. As a matter of fact, Pisano himself took over being the head of the works after Giotto died. And then he became head of the works for the Orvieto Cathedral. So all of these happened at roughly the same time. The Arte de Calimala was the guild that took care of the baptistry ever since at least 1182, and perhaps even before that. And it was the first great guild. It was the Cloth Importers Guild. So the scheme of this is scenes from the life of John the Baptist, and it's in 28 scenes, or rather, I should say, it's in 20 scenes, and the other 8 are the virtues. Charity, hope, humility, and so forth. Those are the bottom 8 panels. So these were done, and it was very unusual actually to have a bronze door even at this time. bronze doors. There were maybe a handful in Europe. These were cast in Venice by Jacopo Avanzano. They were made out of wax. Originally, they were carved out of wax. And it took Pisano about 6 years between carving the sculpture, having it cast, and then chasing it before it was put into the door opposite the cathedral.
Now, that's nothing compared to the subsequent door. 6 years is nothing compared to the other two sets of doors, right?
Right, that's exactly right. Partly it's because these had greater simplicity. And that's partly it. Partly it may have been part of a workshop, which in this case we don't know about because there's no documentation about who was helping Pisano. I'm certainly sure people were helping Pisano do these. It was all done in the Gothic style. They're in quatrefoil panels. Why don't you show the...
Okay, the next...
Yeah. You can see that it was done in quatrefoil panels. This particular one
Explain what a quatrefoil panel is.
Oh, okay. The border around the image is composed of a square and at its sides semicircles. That's a quatrefoil, and it was a figure that was well liked during the late Roman Empire and clear through the Gothic period. And the composing in a quatrefoil was always very, very difficult. This particular scene shows John the Baptist baptizing either Christ or he's baptizing other members of Christ's disciples. So, of course, this is from the life of John the Baptist, and the gilding was done so that the figures could stand away from the background much more easily. So that was great. And you can really see that this is a beautiful example, actually, a really wonderful example of Gothic sculpture.
Now, you said, you implied a couple of minutes ago that the quadrifoil came first and then this was superimposed with it, as opposed to this being done and then that being built around.
Well, actually, it was composed of many pieces. In this particular case, I believe that the quatrefoil and the figures were assembled, partly soldered and partly pegged into place. So the back side of this it's not too pretty. But this was the great example of the first door, and as I say, it was originally on the doors opposite the cathedral.
The east doors.
The east doors.
So this was originally the east door.
This was originally the east door.
And what would you think would be the original north and south? Just regular doors?
They were wooden doors.
Right.
They were wooden doors.
Okay. Let's move.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Oh, this is from the competition of 1401.
Oh, the competition door. Okay,
yeah,
right.
This
the
is
original competition. Let's get that as big as possible.
Yeah. By the time 1401 came around, Florence was an extraordinarily wealthy town. As a matter of fact, northern Italy was incredibly urbanized. And the population may have approached, at that time, 70,000. In the middle 1300s, it was about 100,000, probably the largest city in Europe. And in order to make the baptistry even more magnificent, the Calimala, the Arte de Calimala, ordered a competition among the leading sculptors of the time to make another set of doors that would this time replace the eastern doors, and these would become the doors of paradise, or the doors that lead in front of the cathedral. Many sculptors were chosen. There was Lorenzo Ghiberti. There was Donato Brunelleschi. There was Donatello, Jacopo della Quercia.
Wow. Who's who of?
Yeah, it was a who's who
15th
of the
century
great
Florence.
of the great sculptors of that time. This one is Brunelleschi's, and you can see it's extremely well done. Brunelleschi was a sculptor, and he was an architect who eventually designed the dome to the cathedral and many other things as well. So this was his competition piece submitted in 1403. It's kind of interesting that they decided to spend all this money at that time because in 1402 they were saved from being invaded by Milan by the death of the Duke. So, but they were still contemplating this in 1401 and 1402. So that's pretty.
So here's a hypothetical question. So let's say Brunelleschi had gotten the commission.
Yeah.
Would he have still, you think, been involved in the dome of the cathedral, or at that point he would have been too busy?
Well, it's kind of interesting. At that time, right after he quote unquote lost or gave up, we don't know which, to Ghiberti, he and Donatello decided to go to Rome to study the ancient buildings there. Right. And so he made an incredibly detailed study of the Pantheon, which in all likelihood led to his ability to analyze what would be required for the largest dome outside of the Pantheon since the Pantheon was built. So, so I don't know.
Did he leave in a huff like, so keep your doors, I'm going to Rome and study?
Well, according to one of his anonymous biographers, yes, he did. He left in a huff. Well, if I'm not going to get the commission for the doors, then the heck with you.
The heck with him. Right. I'm going to Rome.
I'm going to Rome. That's it. According to Ghiberti's commentaries, his autobiography, virtually everybody in the Kalimala, and that meant everybody who was part of the guild, approved his design. And in fact, wrote a letter to that effect.
And what happened?
And so he was the guy who got it all. But this is his claim that there was no one who ever opposed the choice of his panel. People say that Brunelleschi's and Ghiberti's were equally chosen, but no one knows. Okay, you can see in this panel, by the way, that everything's sort of furious in there.
What's going on here?
Yeah, well, in the center you see Abraham going to slice the throat of Isaac, and the angel is rushing at the top left to stay his hand, and right in front of Isaac is the ram, and below that was something that they added for the contract for all of the plaque builders, the contestants, 2 servants and a donkey. Why they had the 2 servants and a donkey, I don't know. There may be some documentation to it, but that's not part of the story, actually, biblically. So, and there you see a tree sort of stuck in the other portion of the quatrefoil. So everything is very balanced, and it's all very symmetrical. It's like it's in 2 registers. There's a lower one with the donkey and the 2 servants, and then an upper one. It is very typical of Gothic storytelling.
Right. And of course, Abraham was given the order from God to kill his son Isaac.
To demonstrate his faith.
Loyalty, right. Loyalty
his
and faith. Let's move it to...
Okay, and this is Ghiberti's. And you can see the competition panel. And you can see this is very different. The action between Abraham and Isaac is less violent. Abraham is actually sort of hesitating. Yeah. He's pulling back. Yeah. And Isaac is in a much more Roman tradition, that is to say, a classical position. And you can you can see them very clearly. Even the donkeys and the two servants and all the rest of that are sort of confined to the lower left-hand corner. So it sort of as another surround to the main story, which is Abraham and Isaac, which was one of the things that was very, very well liked by the guild members. They felt that this was a more, quote, modern version, even though there's still the sway, the Gothic sway of Abraham, and voluminous, clothes and drapery and so forth. But they felt that this was much more dynamic, and there was somehow less violent than the other.
So that was the theme that was given to all
of them. And these are the only two that are left.
Abraham and Isaac.
Abraham and Isaac, because initially it was going to be, this story was going to be scenes from the Old Testament.
I see.
Okay, and there was another reason that I think the Kalimala chose it. It's because almost all of this was cast in one piece by Ghiberti in his workshop, which was not far behind the cathedral. Brunelleschi could not do that. As a matter of fact, he cast these things in he cast his in several pieces, like Pisano, and it would have cost much more. So there you are. That's the
who made the decision here?
The members of the Kalimala. I don't have their names,
so
but
the
there
guild
is
themselves made the
guild,
decision.
Yeah,
so they must have had some pretty smart people there who knew.
They did. As a matter of fact, most of them were. Well, of course, the big decision makers were the local bankers, the international bankers for the big companies at the time, because the Cloth and Porters Guild was still very important. Not as important as the Wool Guild, but it was. I don't have a list of the head members, but they were among the leading families in Florence.
Smart. I mean, art savvy.
Well, as a matter of fact, when you realize that the only thing that you had for pictorial representation were paintings, frescoes, and sculpture. And so if you were going to learn anything about visual information, I mean, today we have everything. We have books and magazines and TV and movies, but then that's all they had. And so their senses were very honed as to small differences.
Right. Okay, let's see what this is.
So this is the door as it is. It's actually scenes from the life of Christ. At the upper 20 and the lower 8 are the 4 evangelists, and then the four fathers of the church below them. So all of this is stories from the life of Christ, from the Annunciation to Pentecost.
And again, they divided it 20 and 8.
Yeah, 20 and 8, right. And many times it's been theorized by some sculptors that they could make shallower reliefs at the bottom and have less sticking out because it was only one portrait, and so therefore there would be less abrasion and less easily knocked off.
Is that right?
Yeah. So the foliage.
Now, how high is this? How high are we talking about here? Like what is the height on the actual door?
I believe each one is 28 inches.
Right. So this is a little over 2. So this is like 4 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. And the people
2, 4,
were
6, 8, 10, 12, 14 feet. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and then as you got up higher, of course, I mean, people may have like pushed the door to get in, so there would be more kind of, tactile.
Right,
connection.
And remember, there were a lot of people who actually could bring wagons and other things there.
Oh, is that right?
So, for the service of the cathedral and of the baptistry. The jambs to the door were done much, much later by Ghiberti's son Vittorio and one Corso his grandson.
Right.
So these two were fire gilded so that you could actually see the panels, and they did take a long time to carve them. It took between 1403 and 1424 to complete it. The chasing took a very long time because it's much more complicated. The casting was done by Donatello himself. Much of the sculpture and chasing was also done by Donatello, by Michelozzo, by Palaiuolo, and a whole host of other famous people that he got to work in the workshop. So this was a big collective effort on the part of the leading artists in the early 1400s.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that so many, so many of the well-known sculptors were involved in this. I thought it was just Ghiberti who did the whole thing.
No, Ghiberti was also involved in sculpting statues for the Or San Michele. And so during this time, he sculpted 3 statues for them, for the various guilds. Right. And then he went to Siena to do a baptistry, and he was all over the place.
Okay. So again, Or San Michele is another church in Florence.
Right.
So just to let the audience know what that is.
And this is the visitation of Mary to Elizabeth. Elizabeth was the cousin of Mary, and she lived about 100 miles away in Hebron, so it said. And when Mary was given the Annunciation, she also heard that her cousin Elizabeth was also pregnant with St. John the Baptist. So she went there and waited until St. John the Baptist was born.
I see. Is that, and she's holding?
And
she's
Elizabeth is holding.
That's John the Baptist.
That's John the Baptist as an infant.
Okay, I understand. Interesting. All right, so.
And here we have a nice shot of the second set of doors that Ghiberti made for the Calimala.
Okay, so once again, the east doors were now moved yet again
to the north.
To the north. So
after 1452,
Pisano's east doors were moved to the south. Ghiberti's first doors, the competition doors, were moved to the north.
Right.
And now he was commissioned to do.
Well, actually, it wasn't. It was only moved in 1452 after he finished these doors. So he was commissioned in 1425 to start them, and it was only when it was finally decided to switch the installations in 1452. So these are completely different. These are stories from the Old Testament, the precursors, a lot of the precursor stories to the arrival of Christ. Roughly at the same time, well, actually a little bit later, around 1500, the sculptures that you see above the doors were done by Andrea Sansovino, one of the great sculptors during the same time as the period of Michelangelo. And this is now a copy. The original is in the works of the Duomo. But this second set of doors, there was no competition. They just gave this to Ghiberti.
Right. Let's, I think we're moving on. This is...
Okay, so in the jambs of the door, this is, Ghiberti had an image of himself on one side of the jamb. And it's a great self-portrait.
Yes, it is.
It's a great self-portrait. It's very revealing. He's sort of a shrewd businessman, which he was.
But he waited until the second set of doors for the self-portrait.
Right. And he also had his father on another jamb. So there were many portraits around there of various people, prophets and so forth, doctors of the church. So, and all the floral decoration, as I said, on the jambs was once again done by his son. As a matter of fact, most of the chasing was probably done by Michelozzo. And so, after the 1440s, Ghiberti was pulling away from actually doing sculpture.
Right, right. Okay, let's move ahead.
So there's a very nice picture. You can see that these are now pictorial reliefs. They're not in a quatrefoil. They're now in a window.
Right.
Like Alberti said, that a picture is a window into the world. And these are based upon, roughly based upon, perspective principles, probably modified for viewing from various positions. So they actually are usually 1 point perspective. That means all of the vanishing points go to the more or less the bottom third of the panel. And it's a unique beginning to Renaissance sculpture in Florence at that time. So this is
now all these are the portraits.
They're portraits.
One of which is Ghiberti.
Yes.
Portrait busts or reliefs or whatever.
Yeah, they're little portrait busts.
Little portrait busts. Wow.
Around the door. Huh. So it's a very complex thing. The program was supposedly written by Leonardo Bruni, one of the great humanists in Florence.
Now that gate in the front is just to keep people away.
At one time, people entered. It was said that Michelangelo called these the gates of paradise. But actually, the words gates of paradise had been used for baptistries for a long time. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, probably 1,000 years. Because it faced the cathedral. A baptistry pretty much was on the same axis as the central nave of the church. And so this was your portal to paradise.
Right.
So this is one of the great panels. Vasari thought that this was the best. This was the story of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers, but then after he was sold into slavery, became the on the right hand of the Pharaoh of Egypt, and then. When his brothers came, because there was a famine in Canaan, he revealed himself to them. So all of those stories are shown in each part of this panel. Each one is represented. Now, what is so beautiful about this is that this goes from high relief that you see in the center, the woman holding the sack on her head, to extremely shallow crushed relief
on the top.
On the top, and that's the influence of Donatello and his crushed relief, Schiacciato relief, which is almost totally pictorial. And you can see that, you see here, there's this the feeling of perspective in the recession of the arches, the diminution of the size of the people. It's a perfectly built piece of Renaissance sculpture.
God, you could learn everything from this.
Oh yeah,
just this one panel.
Yeah, people actually studied the doors. I mean, at that time, people went there and would look at the doors. And as a matter of fact, preachers would give stories relating to the doors. They would tell biblical stories during the sermons that would be illustrated on the door. So wow. It was a very living portion of their life.
Right.
By the way, both doors ultimately cost 50,000 florins, and when you consider that in the 15th century, Florence bought Arezzo from the Pope for 22,000 florins. They bought the whole town.
And this one panel.
Not this one panel, but
the one panel was 15,000 florins.
No, the door itself was altogether. Well, between the north and south doors, it was 50,000 florins.
And that was a little more money
than twice the cost of Arezzo.
Arezzo. Well, I've been to Arezzo.
Yeah.
Okay, so the interior. We have a couple of minutes.
Okay, so this is the interior. It was decorated in the early 1200s. Most of these were done under the Franciscans, who imported mosaic builders from Venice. Probably Cimabue did a lot of the design work, but the execution took about 150 years. The font that you see there was an immersion font, and it came probably from another church much earlier than 1648. The old font was taken out in 1588 by the order of Cosimo, the Archduke.
And went where?
It went nowhere. It was destroyed.
Okay, so here's an overhead view of the.
That's an overhead view, and there's a baldachin over another font, a sprinkling font. Where you see the last step was the outer diameter or the inner diameter of the previous baptistry.
I see. Okay,
And there's the baldachin over and pulpit.
So there were two ways to baptize. You could either fully immerse or just sprinkle water.
Right, and this was a pulpit. You sprinkle water for a baby because most people by this time were Christians.
Right. Okay.
And so this was a pulpit where they would give sermons.
Okay. I think this is a close-up of the ceiling.
Right.
Really
which is really beautifully ornate.
Yeah.
From the 1200s.
1200s. And that's it. Nope, there's a close-up.
Yeah, there's a close-up. This was done by Capo di Marco Valdo, probably the first post-Byzantine artist before Giotto.
And okay, so what is this and what is he eating?
Okay,
quickly.
This is an example
seconds.
of the devil eating the souls that were condemned in hell.
Okay,
and it's on the right-hand side of the panel that shows Christ in majesty above the altar.
Okay, and that's it.
That's it.
Nope, we have.
Well, we already talked about.
Yeah. This is above. This is
above the east door.
Okay, so that's it. Well, it's not it.
It's not it.
This was
this was probably the most famous monument in the baptistry. It's the tomb of the last schismatic pope, and it was caused to be there by Cosimo I Medici.
There was a schism. There was one pope in Rome, one pope in Avignon.
And then there was a pope in Pisa, who this guy was, Bernardino Cosa.
Very interesting.
Who became John the 23rd anti-pope.
Okay. That's it.
That's it.
Anyway, as you can see, the next show will be on the 55th Venice Biennale. We'll talk about that more next week when we get to that point. But right now, I'd like to say unbelievable. I'd say it a little differently, but this is broadcasting all over the world. But thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was extraordinarily wonderful.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Okay. In the meantime, buonanotte e buona fortuna.